We have just concluded our first panel for today, a very engaging panel, lots of information and a lively conversation. I'm N.Y. Nassiri, the Executive Director of the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community Incorporated. We are the sponsor of the annual Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities. And this morning, it's my privilege to moderate the panel on building partnerships and networks. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, and I'm going to talk a little bit about their background, and then each of them will have 10 minutes in which to...
Greetings again. This is N.Y. Nassiri. I'm talking right into the microphone, but not having pushed my on button. I apologize for that. I am the Executive Director of the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community Incorporated, the sponsor of the annual Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities. We have just concluded our first panel of the day, a very exciting and engaging panel. The presenters had lots of information, practical information, and really represents exactly what we're trying to do here today. My privilege is to moderate the panel, Building Partnerships and Networks. Our 60 minutes will be divided this way. I'm going to introduce each of the panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to spend 10 minutes in opening remarks. We'll then go into a 20-minute conversation segment, followed by an opportunity for audience members to pose questions. This panel really represents exactly what we mean when we talk about women with distinguished careers having the ability to bring to us wisdom based on experience and position. I'm going to start with Carolyn Fennell. We'll do alphabetical order. Carolyn Fennell is responsible for external and internal media and public relations at Orlando International Airport and Orlando Executive Airport. She is a Senior Director of Public Affairs and Community Relations for the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, Orlando International Airport, and Orlando Executive Airport. In her role as primary spokesperson, she oversees all domestic and international media relations, including crisis communications for both airports. At the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, she has held various roles in customer service and community engagement, and currently is also responsible for the airport's public art collection. Prior to joining the Aviation Authority, Fennell has held positions as production assistant to Peter Jennings for ABC News in London and a publicist for Walt Disney World. Among her numerous awards are Public Relations Professional of the Year by the Florida Public Relations Association, Orlando Business Journal Businesswoman of the Year, and Airports Council of North America's Ted Busselman's Legacy Award for Creativity and Excellence. Fennell served on the Jacksonville Branch Board of Directors for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and was twice appointed chair of the board in 2013 and 2016. She previously served on the Executive Committee and Board of Directors for the Orlando Orange County Convention and Visitors Bureau, now known as Visit Orlando. In the airport industry, she served on the airport's Council International North America Marketing and Communications Steering Committee and previously twice chairman of that committee. Mizingu Melu is a chief executive officer and managing director of the Absa Bank PLC Zambia. Melu is the former chief executive of Barclays Africa Operations and chief executive officer of Standard Chartered Bank Zambia. As the chief executive officer of Barclays Africa Management, she was responsible for overseeing the development of stakeholder relationships with governments, regulators, the boards, and customers in the subsidiaries on the African continent outside of South Africa. All Barclays Africa group managing directors outside of South Africa reported directly to her. She took office effective 1 October 2014. Prior to that, she was the managing director and chief executive officer of National Bank of Commerce, Tanzania. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate her on her newly released book, Braving the Odds, a memoir on perseverance, finance, and faith.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All righty. So let's start with Carolyn Fennell. Will you take your 10 minutes, please, and talk with us a little bit about, for you, what this business of networking and building partnerships and networking is all about. Carolyn Fennell first, please.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. And I listened to the previous panel. I am extremely honored to be with the group of panelists for today. But I think when we talk about networking and partnering, I take a quote from Michelle Obama, who said, "You can't make decisions based on fear and the possibility of what might happen. You make it happen." And that's part of what networking and building relationships does. There's no question about it. You know, we live in a time now where we're kind of in a Venn diagram. This has been, without a doubt, one of the most challenging years that probably any of us have had in the last year. And we don't do business the same way we did it before because of safety, health alliances, which resulted in economic impact. But what we can do is go back to what we learned a long time ago. We jokingly say everything I learned in kindergarten, I learned in my formative years, and that was to ask questions. We learned how to play well with each other. You learned how to help each other. We learned how to reach out. And most of all, we learned to look and listen. And that's part of what networking is about. We need to look at, when we look at the world around us, when we look at business, those simple questions that we use in media, you know, who is it, who is running it, who is in charge, who is making a difference, those are important questions to ask. And then what are they doing? What are you doing? What is your product? How are you doing it? How are you making it happening? Are you doing it just domestically within your country or your area? Or are you reaching out? And that is the importance of a conference like today. But most of all, why are you doing it? Why are you doing what you do? And it doesn't come just to the bottom line. You've heard the story of passion or pride that enter into. So when we start looking at networking, we look at the characteristics of a leader. Leaders have to do some very important elements in terms of making themselves successful in answering that question of why you're in business. And part of that always goes to consensus building. We talked about listening earlier. It goes to consensus building and then being decisive about what you're doing. But more than anything to be successful, it is building a community. And that's what networking is, a relationship building is. When you look at building a community, I think sometimes we, particularly as women, we've been made to think that, you know, I don't have time to take time to talk, I'm busy. But part of that busyness and in resulting successful business is networking, getting to know people. There's some that say in this kind of environment, because you don't go and pass out all your business cards and you don't do your elevator speech in public receptions or public areas, that networking is on pause. Networking may be on pause in a social way, but certainly building relationships, building business alliances is not. And so we need to have a positive attitude, because you'll hear people say, oh, I can't do anything now because of, but we need to have a positive attitude about, you know, I always say to young women when I talk to them about have girlfriends. And I mean, in a business conference, that may sound flippant, but I think it's very important that you have a network you can rely on. build relationships. There's no question about the importance of that. And some of that's done through social media, through LinkedIn. I'll tell you personally, I'll just share. I have about 4 threads that I'm on with women, social media threads I'm on with women, and they have helped me survive during this past year where we've been restricted in how we go out publicly. One of them, it's 11 women, all of them have headed some organization, and we're on all day. Somebody's on all day at some point. They're the early morning, some of them have retired, but we keep up with books to read, movies to see, issues that are going on, political alliances that we can make in making a difference in the community. So you establish acquaintances and you can do it through those measures, and then communicate well. And that starts back with the kindergarten. Listen to what is being shared. Look at what's happening in the industry. I was very pleased to hear the previous panel talk about the value of creativity and outreach and using the basic needs that we have, food, as a way of outreaching and improving. And then we seek opportunities to meet new people. And some of that can be done. I was saying earlier, women used to be teased about, they're just in a corner, gossiping but seek new opportunities, even though we're restricted. I would often have a way of going to the market, the farmer's market on Saturday mornings that we do here, and meeting someone that I had not spoken to over coffee, just to say, what's going on in your business? Tell me about what's happening and what's in the future, because you must be engaged and you must learn. And the other part is taking advantage of opportunities to be in the room. I always jokingly say, be in the room of where decisions are made. My experience on the Federal Reserve Bank Board was an experience. I'm not a banker, I'm not a financier, but certainly I know how to communicate, I hope. And I know what's going on in my community, in my industry. So if I'm in the room, you can make a difference in what happens. So I think basically we need to understand the value of it. We were all taught, shake hands, look someone in the eye, give out your business cards. And sometimes you get home from a social event previously and you didn't have an idea of totally who you spoke to. But right now we can use our churches, we can use our social clubs, our neighborhoods, wherever there's an alliance. And you'll be surprised that even schoolmates who have moved on in their industry can be very, very helpful to you. Look at the political scene. How can you be engaged in development in your community? Run for office, get engaged in committees that are making changes for the vision that your community has in the future. In summary, I guess my message would be just look at being engaged. Take the time to ask the questions about the overall economy of your area, your region, your country. What are the trending areas? Find a way that you can apply your business or your skills to that area. And by all means, it's not just about competing, but it's about collaborative efforts that in the end build relationships.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Carolyn Fennell. This is a woman who has decades of experience, practical experience, knowing how to manage fires, knowing how to communicate effectively. Now, Nzinga Melu, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, and really great to speak immediately after Caroline, and I'll just pick up from what she was saying. And she emphasized a lot on networking, and I want to start from there. Definitely, I'm a firm believer that your network is your network. I think as we build sustainable partnerships across the world, the power of networking cannot be emphasized. And what we have been doing here in Zambia is to look at an organization which is called When Females Lead. When Females Lead is an organization that we started, I founded last year. I'm working with 3 other youth, and what we are doing there is that to say, as we rise as leaders, into these important, powerful positions, our legacy is going to be determined by the amount of women we were able to lift up so that they can even be better than us. So that is very important. So what we have done is to start an organization called When Females Lead, which looks at 4 key pillars. You know, the first pillar is really focusing on innovation. When you look at the stem cells, you know, the stem fields, the STEM fields, you know, a number of women are actually left behind. They haven't really, for some reason, they're not as celebrated or they don't get the right opportunities. So when we talk about partnerships, is how do we support these women in the partnerships, especially the women in the STEM field? So we have a few partnerships with an organization in the UK called, you know, AFBE, which is a Black, you know, economic empowerment for engineers in the UK. So they are supporting us in there. We're also looking at, and I'll get to the agriculture and food just now, but we are also looking at mentoring, where we just mentor girls and really support them and empower them. And we also look at the vulnerable children. You know, we say, as we are doing this, they are the future, let's not leave them behind. But above all, what's really important for us is the agriculture pillar. You know, we have adopted 2 villages where, and they're not very far from the city, but the women there are really struggling. So as we are rising, how do we use our network, speaking of network, to bring women who are already advanced, like the women we have on this forum, to women who are totally underprivileged, but it doesn't mean their brain is underprivileged. It just means they don't have the finances to actually support them. So we're focusing there a lot on food in terms of how do we empower them with the issue of GOTS. You know, we realized that GOTS, G-O-A-T, was something extremely important for them, because when you give them a goat, somehow, because it's alive and kicking and is able to have children, a goat is able to have children within a year. A goat can easily have 6 other little goats, just 1 year. So we realized that, sometimes even 8, we realized that it was important for us to support them with goats, not to give them, not to dish out, but for us to actually empower them and say, these goats are loans. You get them as loans, and at some point you need to pay back. So it's really goat farming, where you're able to pay back so that we're able to empower others. But when you remain with your goats, you are also empowered and able to actually do more with them. So we are hoping in the end, all the women are able to send their school children, they're empowered. But for us, we look at it very much as a small business, and we want to look at it as a business, because if we want to look at it as we are going to give them out, then they will use the goats for food. They will eat the goats as opposed to using the goats for seed. So that's why our emphasis is you must empower the women, and that would be really, really important. And that's what we're doing. But coming back to the topic that we're looking for in terms of how do we build partnerships, the issue of trust comes in. The issue of trust, because even between us and the women, what really works is trust. The fact that I'm going to give you this goat and it's a loan and you're going to pay me back. That sustainable partnership in terms of the trust comes in. And then we're able to then bring the connections and really, you know, be able to make them be more financially stable. Because I'm a firm believer, again, it's not where you are coming from that matters, but where you're going from. So when I look at my story, which I have written in Braving the Odds, which was just published the other day, and by the way, it's already international bestseller, and you can get it on Amazon. And the thing about Braving the Odds is that it's showing that even somebody who's coming from a very underprivileged background, you know, a small little village, that's where I came from, can still make it, you know, in the world amidst all the challenges that I may have gone through. I'm able to still lift up others. And that's where it really talks about finance, because, you know, I've been CEO for the last nearly 15, 16 years, but in different firms. But in that, what am I going to be remembered for if I can't lift up others? So you have to be a sister who's not willing to leave anybody behind, a sister who will say, let's do this together, and I'm going to empower you and I'll be empowered. So really for me, what I'm looking for also from this session is how we help that woman who is in Mwalukanga village, who's doing a goat, and how do we digitize what she's doing? Because right now it's very basic. So together we can do this, and yeah, we can really work together. And those are my opening remarks, Mom. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Interested in having us pursue some of the comments that you have made, Melu, Mzinga Melu. I think that your comments actually represent many of us who are first generation college graduates, who have actually, you speak about your origins there from your small village. I think that Carolyn Fennell and I can certainly talk about that same kind of, in other words, it's, you start in a certain place and you have certain advantages from family, from church faith community. And now that we are at these positions, how is it that we can make a practical difference? And I'd like to have you all talk about, as you have proceeded through this journey in your career, what you have learned in terms of how to balance competition as you are actually trying to advance in your careers, but how cooperation, in other words, how has building partnerships and networking, how has that actually helped you in advancing your career? Let's start there with some practical discussion, so that people don't think this is a sort of utopian and Pollyanna.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you want me to carry on, or Caroline?
You can start. I want, this is a time when we interchange. So I'm just going to ask the two of you to take this question forward and entertain it for a bit.
Okay, no, thank you so much. And that's a great question. And really balancing, you know, competition, you know, as I grow in the corporate world and in leadership, competition is, you kind of pack it in the corporate world and say it exists there and it's important. But when it comes to the world of building sustainable relationship, and when you come to the world of poverty, for example, alleviation and empowerment, I look at it as a pie and say it's a poverty pie. So with a poverty pie, there's no competition. You can't compete. You can only have partnerships, and you can only succeed with partnerships. So for example, if I have to give a practical example of, say, the innovation that we're doing, you know, we've gotten some women, some girls who, you know, they are very clever, but they have never left their villages. But when you look at the result and you compare them to girls, you know, in the city, they actually do better. So what we've been able to do is to then support them with some mentors in the UK. And when you say mentors in the UK, sometimes it sounds, when you're sitting in Africa where I am, it sounds like, wow, this is like, I can't even get my head around that. But these are just women like you and I who are doing their jobs. But the fact that they're in another you know, zone, in another country, the girl already feels, I'm exposed to somebody in another country. So sometimes we try and overthink it and say, how are we going to do that? But it's just the simple solutions that we need. So that's the way I view competition. Yes, in the corporate world as well, I'm competing with another bank who's going to make more money and all that. But when it comes to what really matters, I think what really matters is partnership more than innovation. And when you talk about networking, me speaking on this panel, you know, you find that there are so many, I mean, Miss Zienzi, you know, Dr. Zienzi Dillion there, I mean, she's somebody who I've known for a very long time. And when you know her for a very long time, that is your network. And she's somebody who I know, I might not talk to her for a very long time, but I'll be able to say, Dr. Zienzi, you know what? I am just thinking of how can you help me, you know, do one or two things or whatever. And she's able to say, okay, fine. When I was writing my book, I was looking for somebody to do my forward. And I say, do you know, Dr. Orama from Afri-Eximbank? And she would immediately say, of course, let me call him. And, and before you know it, I have him on my speed dial. That's your network. So I get access to Dr. Orama, not because I got him on my speed dial, but because I know Dr. Zienzi. So for me, that becomes your network, becomes my net worth. So it's bigger than who I know. It's people who know who I know. The people who they know becomes the people I know. And that's the way I see it. Thank you.
Yeah. Carolyn Fennell, will you unmute so that we can hear you?
I agree with you very much. I think part of it is showing up as your authentic self. If you focus on the competing, you lose the substance of what you bring to the table. And there are those that say, I'm competing, but if you show up as your authentic self with your skills and you invite, it takes a village. I mean, we say that expression all the time, but no one can do anything by themselves. I rely on every member of our team here to help me, whether it's the receptionist or the people that are telling me what's going on in the airport. I rely on them. They help me to move forward. It doesn't mean that you don't stand up for what you believe in. It doesn't mean you don't express yourself for what you believe in, but it does mean that you take into account, and we were talking about our growing up, and I grew up in a small town in Florida, but have lived in many places around the world. But the basic skills that I have that I mentioned earlier are still there. A listening, a curiosity about a culture, a desire to help. And I think sometimes when we achieve higher corporate positions, you can be overwhelmed by what I've got to do. One of the areas for me is just to say, and this sounds very elementary, I know, just to say good morning. It's like I tell my two sons who work in international corporate organizations, I said, don't forget to speak to the receptionist and the assistant and the secretary, and they can pave your way. And one son was working for a company in Switzerland, and he said, do you know we move buildings, and my boss's secretary helped move my office? And I said, you're kidding. He said, no, but we speak French together, we get along well. I'm kind of off the track, but the key is, I think, that you compete by your brand, and your brand is all of you, not just what you're doing from a corporate standpoint. What is a person? Who is the authentic person that shows up, that's willing to ask for help, and is willing to collaborate? And from that, you do compete.
Yeah, I do want to add to that. We in Eatonville, we're a small community, a community of about 2,500. And I would say one of the major gifts that we have made, when I say we, I'm speaking now of the Eatonville community. Back in 1990, we began the Zora Neale Hurston National Museum of Fine Arts, a small space, about 1,400 square feet. And that, more than anything, represented a gift from the people of Eatonville. Those were volunteers, each of those, and most of them, we had a couple of men who volunteered each week, but it was the women of Eatonville who gave 2 or 4 hours of their time to actually have people be able to come and into the museum. And I remember once one of the greatest compliments, and most of these women were women who had worked in domestic service, or said another word, they were maids. All right. But the point is that they were, as you say, Carolyn Fennell, the authentic self. They were giving of their time, giving of their spirit, and it reaffirms that sense of, if you want to share, if you understand the importance of sharing. You know, we say, and I've heard you say this many times, that in the United States, one of the things that is unique is this business of volunteerism, that in this country, that spirit of volunteerism is very important. And one of the things that we hear about people who volunteer is you always get more back than what you give. Always have more, give more back than what you give. I'd like to have us continue on with this business of, let's talk about a practical example. Often now, we hear about goats in Africa, and the ability for the goat not just to be a meal, but a business. And we talk about this business of mentoring. Will you all, and for the younger generation, I think that we here, for the most part, are women of quote unquote a certain age, and that we are concerned about the people that come behind us. Let's talk about how we can practically help younger girls and young women to understand how to leverage their authentic selves. How about that? Let's talk about that a practical way that those of us who are on this call, or that you in your current positions, how you are helping to reach out and use what you know about building relationships and mentoring for the younger generations.
I think that one of the challenges is young people, because we're here, and when I hear the biographies of persons on this panel, I am overwhelmed that we must share that we didn't start here, that there was a journey, and that journey included, as my grandfather says, don't get off the road. You know, don't be distracted, or if you get off, get back on the path that you're seeking. I think sometimes we overextol who we are and what we've done to young people. And what they really want is to be listened to and to know that what are the tools for moving on. And part of that is not giving up. You know, in the South, there's an expression of keep a going. That means keep on going. Whatever happens, you know, take the next step. So I think the authentic message of keep going. And the other part, we're so into digital communication. I think sometimes I force, even with digital, and I talk a lot about my family. I apologize, but that's my part of my life. I force them for us to do Zoom calls or telephone calls, just so we're directly speaking to each other. And sometimes just sharing what happened in your life, because we're not perfect, and we each have had a struggle. There are elements that we all had. That was tenacity, that was taking the licks and keep on going, that was curiosity, that was research, and that was being there and being responsible and accounted and accountable. So that's, I think, something that we can talk to young people about. And Chung, you're there for them. And sometimes you don't have a lot of time. I have a lot of young women that will say, I need to talk to you. And I go, okay, can't do it right now, but what about Saturday morning? Or, I mean, not Saturday next week, but I can answer a question now, but let's plan on a chat on. And it's amazing because we don't communicate as much as we should have did. We've lost the neighborhood, as I call it, the porch mother. That mother in the village, the community, knew everything was happening. If you sat down with her, she'd tell you a lot of things about life that you can use in the future.
Yeah. Yes, so I want to pick it up from there and just talk about the value of, you know, as we look at these partnerships, that our authentic self. I think our authentic self has, and thanks Caroline for that, our authentic self has a lot of value, which we need to use to help that woman or that girl who is rearing gods in the village. You talk about gods. And sometimes I don't have to know anything much about gods apart from the basic knowledge, but what I have to know is somebody who knows everything digital about gods. So that's where we need to use our value, the value that God has placed, that the experience that we have acquired over the years. We become the magnet and the connector and the blesser. You know, we are blessed to be a blessing. We become a blesser to that woman who is in the village, she's rearing gods. So the women we're dealing with here, for example, they rear gods. And number one, sometimes their gods die because they don't have knowledge of how to look after them. Neither do I, but I know a cooperative that goes there every Saturday morning to teach them how to do it. Without me using my connections, I've just got blessings, which, you know, I'm going to go with to the grave without using, and that's wrong. So we become authentic by not shying away from what are people going to say if they see me working with villagers, but it's more, how do I use them? Right now, we are looking for more advanced ways of helping them grow their goat business, especially when you look at the digital way. You know, so I would be interested in just hearing from the ladies on the forum as well, if they have any ideas of how do we help these women so that they don't just rear goats the normal way and you pass on the blessing and pay back and all that, but how do we even raise funding so that grow exponentially? Because imagine, they have the same problems we do. I was talking about, you know, talk about COVID, the COVID that we have now. You know, in Africa, we are believing a lot in steaming. You know, where you put a bucket of water and you put the leaves there and you steam. I steam, they steam, same needs, because that's the world has equalized us. You know, we have the same needs right now in terms of what we bring to the table. How do we use our knowledge, our network to support them even better?
Yeah. You know, this is, we are getting down, we have an expression in my family about getting down to brass tacks. In other words, really getting down to the nuts and bolts of what we face as we try to be the best that we can as our authentic selves. There is a question that I want to bring forward from the audience, but I do want to frame this in this regard. One of the practical aspects of what we will do today, we have established a private Facebook page that has the name of this forum, the Africa America Women's Economic Forum, because we want to establish a mechanism that will allow this conversation to continue, that will allow us to build partnerships and networks. And the question that comes from the audience is, what is the action plan, or what would you advise to connect with young women? And I want to frame this particularly from the African American community perspective, because Ms. Milu, you have talked about the village. It's very clear that that you're involved in an initiative that has you working with young women or women in a village setting. Carolyn Fennell, it seems to me that we may be facing a different kind of challenge, because even though the rudiments of the situation may be comparable, different cultural look, but comparable, in this country, there's so much. In other words, the culture tends to work against, let's say, the popular culture tends to work against the kind of solid family values that we came up with as young women. In other words, there's a kind of absence when you look at the, let's say, fragmentation. When as Chris Rock would say, and Chris Rock, for those of you who are coming from a different context, is a comedian who would say that, you know, when Big Mama is 39 and Mama is 26 and the daughter is 13 and Big Mama is in the club on Wednesday night, that's a problem. All right, so that's the context that I'm trying. I mean, really, you may not see that. You may not see that in the African village, but that is something that we are seeing in the African American village. So I'd like to have you all, in other words, as you are framing your response, to take into account those elements that can work against what you're trying to accomplish as the authentic self.
I think that it when you look at attempting to, because we've lost in this country, certainly we've lost some of the basic platforms that said things like, no, you don't do that, or that isn't an appropriate attitude or action to take, because we have instilled so much, do your thing, be your person. That's different from being authentic. This is, I don't have to respect the elders. I don't have to dress in a certain way for an appropriate perception in a business environment. But I think all that one can do is, if you have the opportunity to address or talk to young people, is tell them that. You know, and they'll say, "Oh, you're oh so old-fashioned." I had my niece, and I always joke with her, go, "No, you can't dress like that." Or she teases me. She goes, because I wear pearls every day. It's just something I've done since I was a teenager. And she goes, "Auntie, I tell you, people look at me differently when I dress. It doesn't mean she can't be authentic. Her hair is, she does a natural hairstyle that she says, but you know, I think I channel you." I go, "Okay." But my point is, we have to not be afraid, like as I talk about the porch mother, we have to not be afraid to say what is right. I mean, obviously times change, but there are basic elements that we learn through our elders or through our villages or through our faith-based organization. Being kind to someone, being respectful, speaking your mind, but respecting the people that are in the room, and showing up as you want to be respected. And that's a tough one sometimes, when popularity and bullying and all kinds of ways of getting at trying to attract young people into a certain activity goes on. But we have to be, I think, definitely assertive about who we are and what we expect. Because after all, we do, as sad as it is, particularly in this country, you are representing a group, whether you want to or not. You are representing whenever you present yourself. I work in an airport, and it's surprising. Sometimes we jokingly say, "I know your mama didn't see you come out in this morning to take this flight," because of the way people dress. And we even have sometimes criminal situations where people are kind of underdressed, and we have to call in people to say, "You might want to put a shirt on," or "You might want," and that is sad to me rather than expressive.
Yeah, interesting, Caroline. And yeah, I like the dressing, that I'm sure Mama didn't see you when you were coming to church like that. You know, we see that time. And I think for me, what I see really that works against us is the issue of trust. And we spoke about that earlier, but the issue of trust is extremely important, because if you don't, and we see it, sometimes you'd think you've got to have money to be trusted, but it doesn't work like that. So when we do go to and work with the underprivileged, when females lead, you find that actually people who are at the bottom of the pyramid don't trust easily. And even if you're trying to help them and you mean well, they also have to build your track record with them. So you're only as good as your track record. And when you show up, you can't say, "Oh, you know, because I've got money or whatever," and you expect them to say, "Okay, fine, now I trust you." For you to build that sustainable relationship, and I see it everywhere, working against all the partnerships we're trying to build, it's a question of trust, you know. And once you earn that, you can just do wonders. And I think the other question, especially for the women folk, it's really more the, you know, still feeling that the man has the final say. And it doesn't matter what, I mean, there was a time when we went there for Christmas, And it's a very basic example. We were giving, food to the vulnerable women, and we said, and our donors were very specific that this is for the women. And when we got there, the people who were queuing up were all men. So when he said, where are the women? They said, no, we are the heads of the house. We listed the names of the household. And I'm thinking, but we have to deal with the women. They said, no. We are the ones who determine what to cook, what to whatever in the house. So you give us. And it was difficult for us because that's just the way they do things. So, and the culture, we have to understand that this is the type of culture they work in. And you could cheat them one day and say, we can only deal with the women, but it has to be more sustainable than that. So the fact that you need to educate them to see the women more as, I can stand up and do it. I think sometimes what we have as the advanced women, we take it for granted that the woman next door doesn't actually have that. And I think what works against us as well is digital, or the lack of, because I think, yes, you have a mobile phone and you can do a lot, but imagine if you could digitally decide, which is one of my friends is doing. They decide when the goats will give birth at the same time, because they said it's easier. So the way they do it, throughout the year, they'll keep the male goats separate from the female goats. And then they'll bring them together maybe over one week, where they'll obviously do what they have to do for them to have children 1 week, and then they separate them again. So they're all 4 pregnant within the same week. So it's easier for them to manage. But this is him doing it manually. What if we can think digitally and make it so much easier for us? So the fact that we're becoming a digital world, but digital hasn't really gone to the right places, we will still remain behind. Thank you.
We're having a technical difficulty. Okay. All right. Is everyone able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience, and this is Africa focused. Do you feel that there is an opportunity for STEM education or STEM advocacy in terms of the development of partnerships and networking intergenerationally?
Intergenerationally, that's interesting. I think so. I think the young ones obviously have a lot more opportunities open to them, and the elderly one have the opportunities but haven't used them. So I think for me, intergeneration, there'll always be opportunity, but I don't know whether we can hear more from them in terms of what their thought process is. But definitely, I definitely think when you look at the STEM field, yes, there is. And the young generation knows a lot. We just need to tap into them for them to use it.
Carolyn Fennell, I've heard you mention that the virtual reality actually has provided a different opportunity for networking, but still it is there. You mentioned 4 threads that you have in terms of the digital. Could you speak a little bit more about that in terms of how what you're experiencing might be some advice to others who are listening about how to leverage the digital?
Well, one thread is a book club, and we were before COVID traveling twice a year to a spot and reading a book among all the other pleasures of a resort area. Mm-hmm. And we were friends. We started, a couple of us started Disney together and met each other. And there were a few African Americans there at that time, so we bonded through that familiar cultural need, and we've gone various ways. And they live around the country from California to Washington, Atlanta, and here. So we gather, and particularly this last during the political enhanced activity we had, we were on with them. There's another that's locally here, and we were 11 women that gathered. We used to have a birthday club, and the person that started, it was the women who were president of a college, bank head, and chairman or assistant mayor of our city. We started, and this friend passed through a tragic means, and we stayed together, and we call ourselves sisters, and we've stayed together. But our conversation go from interpretation of a Bible that was written in the 1700s to current popular albums that come out, or to watching TV shows together, and certainly political areas. There's another of a young group that I have. I try to expand the ages so that my much more chronologically advanced age can keep up with what's going on. There's another group there, and then I have a family group and it's just going on and texting and having conversations, sharing articles that have been read, whether they're articles that are in The Economist or other Forbes or Oprah, as long as Oprah was publishing. But I think it gives me a cross section. I can't go and meet people now. And it's just a decision to collect in a group and have conversations. So I think, it doesn't have to be Zoom, it can be a telephone. You were talking earlier about the use of the telephone as a way of communicating in these times. But what you get is a cross section. And we share, business incidents that occurred and how would you handle it? So it's almost like a forum that we can give to each other. And we have different views on a number of things, and our ages span. So you're getting like a town hall meeting in some cases. And a lot of it's for fun, just when we were able to, what play are you going to, or what concert are you going to? And I think by that, particularly for single women or for other, it gives you a sense of belonging. And that's very important, to be felt worthy and belong and valued and respected. That is key to being successful, I think.
Yes. All right. I want to throw out one other question. I think that we have time for one more that I'd like to have both of you respond to. And that is, we've talked about how there might be intergenerational opportunities and challenges. At the level that you all are now, what would you like to see in terms of being able to bring added value on a group basis? And in other words, clearly you are each individually successful women at very high levels within your professions. What would you like to see, or how do you see your ability to leverage your positions so that it advantages your group, being women of African ancestry? How do you see a way forward to make certain that you're not just one of the one, even in Africa, and I'm impressed by the number of women that Zienzi Dillion has been able to introduce us to, in terms of, you're all high-powered women. But you are just, you're just a tiny representation of the women's population. So how do you see leveraging what you've accomplished so that it advantages more people, more women?
Okay,
Neale, do you want to start us? Yes, please.
First, I'll go first. Look, I think when I look at the Africa America Women's Economic Forum, the one that we are on, I think this is amazing, because we are women in 2 different continents, and women who are able, when brought together, we can do wonders. So it's how do I, using my network here in Africa, bring these women together and say, let's have maybe just 5 big needs. And even if we go up to 3 for the year that we're going to do, be it create a market where even if women are weaving baskets here and they're sending them, in America, you're finding a market for them and vice versa, then we're doing something. So it's how, for me, I look at it more where we're trying to do what we can here, using when females lead, where we are lifting others. But I agree with you, it's not enough. It's more, how do you get what we have and use it? So what we used to do in the bank before is that before COVID, is that on an annual basis, we'll take some SMEs to China. And when you take them to China for a week, what you do there is, number one, you expose them. Number two, you get the Chinese big corporates to show them the possibility, like what's possible. And number three, they would go in a time where it's a fair, where there's a fair. And then their ideas open up and they say, wow, we can do this. And then they have partnerships between the Chinese and the Africans. And then that's how you start your business, because your work, half of it is already done. You've got your market, you've got how to do it, you've got where to buy it. And if we can do more of that, where we carry, even if it's just 10 women per woman, and you connect them to you guys. And that's what Dr. Zienzi does very well. It's connecting us. Then we can do wonders. Because whenever you speak to Zienzi and you say to her, oh, we're doing this, and she says, where is the economic value in there? She'll always challenge you. Where is the economic value? So that you're not giving somebody a fish to go and fish, they end up eating it. But you're giving them a fish for them to actually start, empowering themselves. So for me, it's to use what we have, which is the cross-border that we have seen, to empower that woman in Walukanga that we're working with.
Thank you. Carolyn Fennell, some last words on this item?
Yes, I think the key, I go back to being in the room and what skills you bring to the room. I know a quick example of my serving on the Federal Reserve Bank Board, and part of our board meetings, and everyone here would say, how are you on the bank board? You're not an economist, you're not a financer. And my bank manager would say, Ms. Madhu, yeah, you need help. But I would, in my report, I would talk about, and this was in the heart of the big recession when I was there. And when I would give my report, I said, my hairdresser says that women are coming back to get their hair done again, or they're getting nails done again, or the boutiques in my community are saying, women are going to the for sale, but they're coming in, they're buying one item instead of none. And, those are the kind of messages I would take back, besides my business of travel. I said, people are traveling. They may not be staying as long, but they're traveling. And those were anecdotes that I brought from my professional and my personal life that they began to factor. So the economists in the federal bank would want Carolyn's your report in yet, because while they were talking about interest rates and GNP, but they needed the anecdotal of where is the economy going? Where is the confidence that the consumer has in spending money? So what I took to the area was people are going out to eat more. They may not be going, they may be just not getting an appetizer and a dinner and all, but they are going out. So I think sometimes we are shy of what we bring to the table. So know who you are and what you are. And as our new vice president says, I may be the first, but I won't be the last.
Right. Thank you so much, Carolyn Fennell and Mizinga Melu, for, I think, an inspiring panel. The challenge sometimes when you're digital is, how do you keep from being a talking head? How do you keep people from having their eyes sort of glaze over? But I want to thank the both of you for really an interesting interchange. I want to remind people that we've talked about the authentic self and about trust. In other words, really, it's a matter of bringing to the table, or bringing to relationships values human values that allow for practical relationships to evolve. Want to remind you that we have a private group Facebook page, Africa America Women's Economic Forum, so that we can keep this conversation moving. And I like this idea of project. Let's think about a way that we can work on something specific, and so that we can see what occurs. Now, we are halfway through. We have a total of 4 panels. We are halfway through. We're going to take another bit of a break. And thank you so much for your attention, your participation, and your spirit.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much.